This is Justin Kantor.
Kantor.
This is Irene.
Yeah, hi.
Hi, how are you doing?
Okay, they gave me Kantor. I thought that sounded
No, it's Kantor. It's like the Hebrew, means
Kantor,
singer.
yeah,
Singer in the
like
temple.
the restaurant.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Yeah, the restaurant, too, yeah.
Okay.
So how are you doing?
I'm doing fine.
Good.
You have a magazine at Berklee.
Yeah, it is Berklee's publication, the student publication. It's called The Groove, and I'm an alumni now. I graduated from there last May in their music business program, and I've continued to write for them.
Yeah, I saw your article on film. It was very nice.
Oh, you enjoyed it? Oh, thank you.
You want to know my horror story?
Well, no, I don't want to. I'm not trying to make, with all the stories. As you saw in that one, I think it was pretty well balanced.
Upbeat,
yeah, and that's what I like to do. Because for me, I'm also fascinated just by the historical end of each artist, because especially with you.
You might be a record executive one day.
Yeah.
And could save all of us.
Right. Yeah. So
that's stupid.
try to put a good spin on it, but so yeah. So you're from the Bronx originally, right?
I'm originally from the South Bronx, yeah.
And what are your earliest memories of growing up here? And I'm in New York now, actually. I'm not in the Bronx, but I'm in Manhattan, so in the same vicinity.
Well, we lived in a very interracial neighborhood, very much like Colin Powell. And I started in Catholic school, and then started because I started in the business so young. I was in the Latin entertainment industry between 5 and 8.
Right.
In the years from 5 years old to 8. So by the time I turned like 7 or 8, I was already starting to do American off-Broadway productions. And
were they Misbehaving? And
no, that was much later. That was in my teens.
Oh, okay. I thought you had actually done like some recording really young too. Like you did a Spanish album.
I did a Spanish album. Yeah, about 7 or 8 years old.
Oh, so how did that all come about? I mean, how did you get involved so early?
I had a stage mother.
Yeah.
And I had a professional musician for a dad. And he had a lot of connections. He was a very well-known salsa horn player with a merengue band, very famous merengue band, and they had recordings and stuff like that in the 50s.
Yeah.
And he met my mom in the 60s, and when they had me, I was very musically inclined as a baby.
Yeah.
So they promoted that and took me to lessons and took me to auditions. And at that time, I was working a lot.
Yeah, I know.
So, but by the time I was 9 years old, I started my first television series. It was a spin-off from Sesame Street.
With the Electric Company.
And then from there, did some after-school movies of the week.
Right.
And then I landed my first film.
With Aaron Loves Angela?
Yeah.
Yeah.
As a pre-teener.
Yeah. When you were growing up doing, off-Broadway and TV work and recording and everything, were you enjoying it? Was it something you were thinking, this is what I want to do? Or was it something that more or less it was just put upon you and you just kind of naturally...
Some of it was put upon me, but the other end of that was that I really enjoyed performing.
Yeah.
It was definitely something that was in my blood,
Yeah.
But it got to be, like a major career for a child, which I think is difficult. I really think that children, unless they're, of course, the offspring of other stars, or if they're going on the nepotism thing, which so many young people who make it ride that card and make it,
Mm-hmm.
I didn't have that card. My father was famous, but in another world. He wasn't famous in the American scene.
Right.
But unless you have that going for you, I really do believe that it's best for kids to go to school and find themselves and deal with all that madness after they graduate.
Yeah, right. Now, when you went to something like the professional training school, was that part of your regular schooling, or was that just strictly a school for the performer?
That was strictly a regular schooling for professional kids who worked. You know, and like a lot of ballet dancers went, violinists, concert violinists, a lot of child star actors went. You know,
right.
I went to outside. They did not teach the arts.
Oh, they didn't teach the arts. Okay.
The High School of Performing Arts.
Okay.
Which I did get in.
Right.
For junior high, but couldn't go because I was working.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Which is ironic because years later, here I would be in a film about it.
Right.
And sort of represent the school that I never got to go to.
Yeah.
But
ironic.
I got in for all 3 departments.
Wow.
It's very funny.
And well, what about the Lincoln Square Academy? Was that a performing school, or that was also
they were strictly schools for kids who worked or were in training.
Mm-hmm.
So that they had special hours if you had to do a show or if you had to, take a class at Juilliard or something.
Yeah.
They would work around your schedule, your training schedule, and your performance schedule.
And I know that I'm sure one really memorable event was the concert you did with Stevie Wonder and Sammy Davis Jr. at Madison.
Yeah, that was pretty incredible.
Well, now what was it for exactly? It was
I don't remember. I think yes, it was a tribute to Duke Ellington.
Okay.
And he was there with his orchestra. It was major stars, and Roberta Flack was a novice then. Still, I mean, she just had her first album out, and Stevie Wonder was there, and Sammy Davis Jr. was the host. And outside of the Voices of Harlem, which was a singing choir,
right?
I was the youngest person on the show.
Yeah, wow.
It was amazing.
So you were, how old were you when you did that? 10 or something?
I was, maybe a little younger.
Yeah, wow. I mean, you were really familiar with who they were, or were you kind of, as far as all the people around you?
Were.
Yeah.
I absolutely knew. I was always into music. I was way ahead of my years in terms of music.
Yeah. Who were some of the earliest people you remember listening to? And
well, I was very much groomed on the music of the great songwriters.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, people like Carole King and Laura Nyro and Joni Mitchell and Valerie Simpson, and
Oh yeah, great stuff.
James Taylor was one of the few males that I was very into that.
The singer-songwriter kind of thing. Yeah.
My thing. Of course, as well as Motown and the Stones. And,
right, the major players.
The rest of the crowd that was making such an impact on music, the Beatles. But as far as what I would go home and just kind of get into my groove thing on, it was always on the women of song.
Yeah.
Female songwriters of that.
Yeah. Well, Laura Nyro, especially, I mean, she did some really funky stuff. She was so diverse in her writing. I mean, from her own stuff to Fifth Dimension, etc. It was just great. When you, because you mentioned earlier about doing electric company and TV work, was that a different world to go into from the stage? Was it a much different experience?
Well, I had already had TV experience at 5.
Okay, all right, with the Spanish television.
My mom and I used to take the bus to Newark, and I'd work on Canal 47, Channel 47.
Okay.
Which was the big Latin television broadcast station in Newark.
Okay.
And all the Spanish stars with their talk shows, all the Latin Johnny Carsons, if you will.
Right.
I was on. At 5 and 6.
Yeah. And were you like a co-host, or were you performing?
They would bring out the little child to entertain them at the end of their interviews with all the Latin stars, and I'd do Carmen Miranda impersonations, or
cool.
I'd sing in Spanish, and in a pretty dress, and I was like Britney Spears was.
Yeah.
Club, I don't know.
Yeah. No, I can see the. Was it when you started going? I mean, I guess at some point it was the transition making from exclusively the Latin world to doing the American things, and how, if at all, were you affected by being of a minority and and pursuing different roles, especially when it comes to TV? I mean, was there?
Well, I was really luckier than most. I mean, I didn't really feel it directly until I became a young woman.
Right.
As a child, they're much less discriminating against
just because you're a kid, right?
Of color. But the minute you grow up, forget about it.
Yeah. Is that because it's just the typecasting and everything like that, or
because of the racism in the industry? They
right.
don't want beautiful, pretty women of color, playing leading roles, playing female leads, because it means playing female leads opposite white men.
Right.
That's it in a nutshell.
Yeah. So you have both black and Puerto Rican heritage, right? Or what?
Well, my father is a black Puerto Rican.
Okay, all right.
Okay? And my mother's a white Cuban.
So does that?
Well, I'm Latin biracial.
Right. Okay.
Okay.
So does that make it more complicated, do you think, than just being? Black? I don't know.
It all adds up to
or it's the same.
biracial.
Right.
And in my case, it all adds up to Latin.
Right. Yeah.
Black Latin.
Yeah.
That's kind of what But I've rarely, even as a kid, I've always had an innate sense of not allowing other people to define what I am.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm very. I pay a lot of homage to my native ancestry as well, because I've got a lot of native blood on both sides of my family.
Mm-hmm.
Even though they're one's white and one's black, and they're both Latin, there's a ton of Indian
different.
stuff.
Oh yeah.
Lots of native,
Yeah, I can
Carib, Seminole, Aztec, a lot of that kind of blood running through both.
Yeah, it's funny. I didn't notice that until I think when you were in People last summer. I remember one of the pictures. I could really see the influence with the Native American. Yeah. So that makes it even all the more richer, I'm sure. As far so doing Aaron Loves Angela, like that would be like your first movie, right? Your first full big screen movie.
Yeah.
So what was that experience like going into that? With a major.
Well, actually, that was more like an indie film.
Right.
I mean, it was shot locally in the city.
Yeah, no, I've seen it.
My first film that felt like a real Hollywood film was Sparkle.
Right.
I mean, that was when I was shipped out to L.A. and had my little actress chair, and I was put up and had the driver and all of that.
Yeah.
And had my mother with me because I was underage and had 4 hours of school before we shot. All of that.
Wow. So, so they were pretty different experiences, and that was with those two movies.
Yeah.
And
one was like the struggling movie maker, Gordon Parks Jr., God rest his soul. With a low budget, running around after us in different locations in New York with a camera.
Yeah.
And the other one was like a set,
Right.
A backlot at Warner's.
Yeah, no, that's really cool. I enjoyed both of them. I thought your performance in both of them I really enjoyed. And
thank you.
So in between there, I know Sparkle, I guess that got the ball rolling for you, sort of, with different things in the industry. Yeah. Was it what you expected as far as the reaction and just how the industry was?
That was amazing, and it's still amazing to me that people go on and on and on about that film. I do think one of the reasons was that at the time, other than Sounder, which was a wonderful film with Kevin Hooks and
was Cicely Tyson?
Yes,
yeah,
thank you.
Yeah.
And it was done by Gordon Parks Jr.'s father, Gordon Parks Sr.
Mm-hmm.
And it was nominated for an Oscar. And up until then, all the movies involving people of color, Afro-Americans, was exploitative.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, it was all this, the Superfly thing, and
Yeah.
which, I mean, in itself, I think
the Pam Grier movies.
Yeah, it did a lot for people too.
Yeah.
But these movies were dramatic movies, and not, that genre of black action hero.
Yeah. Just showing the normal life aspect as well, I guess you would say.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It wasn't the, I mean, and they call it exploitation films, please. I mean, every action movie with all these white actors is an exploitation film.
Yeah, right, exactly.
They call it action movies. I prefer to refer to them as black action movies.
Right,
exactly
yes.
what they were.
Yeah.
No different than the white ones.
Mm-hmm.
It's the same kind of thing, except far less money.
Yeah, a different budget.